Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. And welcome to this episode of Yogananda Podcast, where we're on chapter 15, part 2. Now we're on the great story of the cauliflower robber. And we started the last episode on the first part of this chapter. We have a full quartet, by the way, today, folks. So Mike's back with us. Welcome, Mike. Glad to have you back. Looking back at the prior episode, what happened, Frank? Give us a summary.
We read the first couple of pages of the Autobiography of Yogi Chapter 15. That's what happened.
Nice.
No, just kidding. Obviously we had the story, but we preceded that with a bit of an introduction about the Puri ashram and some history and some background information about the importance of Puri as a place of pilgrimage. And we also discussed Shankaracharya as well as the link into that. And then we discussed the whole story of the cauliflower robbery, which was really amusing to share with the three of you, the two of you actually. And we discussed in particular the instances where Sri Yukteswar interceded for the crazy man and influenced him in ways that are both magical and in grace as well. And then we finished the episode with a brief explanation as to why he did it and what he did, but not how. And that's where we are now.
Nice. So we're going to start this second part of the chapter 15. Folks can read along with us from I asked Sri Yukteswar that evening, and you can read along till the final sentence of the in that role he had successfully directed the peasant, etc., etc. So you can read it until that sentence if you want to read along with us. So we're going to look at really Sri Yukteswar and Mukunda are together, and Mukunda's baffled. He's wondering what had happened, and he asked his guru Sri Yukteswar that evening, so later on, to explain the incident. And I thought this was quite maybe insightful, but certainly kind of comical in a way. Sri Yukteswar didn't actually explain. He shook his head slowly and he said, "Someday you'll understand." And that was it. And Guruji then goes into explaining, and this is what we're going to look at in this episode, explaining actually what happened. But I thought just to pause for a second. Imagine if you're Mukunda, you see this incident where, yes, he didn't lock the door to the hermitage. He had presented Sri Yukteswar these beautiful cauliflowers, and Sri Yukteswar seemed to have this awareness and ability to direct the thief, the would-be thief, the robber, to go into the hermitage and take one cauliflower. So Mukunda would have been scratching his head, as he said here, he's baffled by this. And Sri Yukteswar doesn't actually tell him what happens. And it isn't until quite later, until Guruji really references through science, the advent of science, what had happened. So I thought to myself, gosh, if I was Guruji, I would be a bit frustrated, mentally thinking, I just want to know. But he doesn't say anything about this period, does he?
He said that, but Mukunda said that there were some baffling features. Obviously, the whole thing is baffling. No, baffling, it's strange. But I wonder which, considering the magical life that Mukunda has led until now, I wonder why or which specific sections of this you'd find baffling. I think it's that the crazy man just turning course and picking only the cauliflower to steal. I think that those two things, and then also Sri Yukteswar is like, nudging and hinting every now and then to Mukunda that something bad's going to happen and you're going to be punished. So I think those are probably two or three of the things that he found baffling.
I would say that even fundamentally, the dramatic halt that Sri Yukteswar said, Mukunda, did you lock the door And then there was some time passed, and then he said, "No, you did not." So this kind of definitive moment where it's like, how did you know I didn't lock the door? Because Mukunda at the time said, "I don't think so. I think I did." So he wasn't even. So, to me, I would have thought, well, how did he even know in the first place? And say so definitively that I did. So he was able to see this through clairvoyance, or well, as we're about to see, Sri Yukteswar is quite advanced indeed. And so Mukunda, or rather Paramahansa Yogananda, tells us really it was some years later when radio burst onto the scene on an astounded world. He remembered Sri Yukteswar's prediction. And he goes into the idea here that age-old concepts of time and space were annihilated. So could you picture yourself back in the 30s, 1930s, when you didn't have radio, and now suddenly you do? This would have been quite a revelation, Greg.
Yeah. So you say 1930s, but this instance would have taken place in about 1912 or something along those lines, when Mukunda was like approaching 20. And so there's 20 years since that point that Sri Yukteswar is talking about when he says, some years later, you'll understand someday, and then radio will burst onto the scene. But yeah, it would have been insane. The whole radio thing would have been quite insane, because the whole telegram thing was I don't know, the code signals, and interpreting code and deciphering messages. That was like, I don't know if it had the same kind of like impact as radio did, by being able to speak to someone and receive an actual message, not like beeps. Would have been quite insane.
I found that explanation interesting because I understand radio is a similar concept. You send information across the world, but he did it without a device. He did it just with his mind. And I find the difference between using your mind and the device is almost larger than just learning about the science behind it. Maybe in a higher age it will be different. Maybe in a higher age we will all be able to send messages to each other easily. But right now I found it interesting that he brought that up, and that I guess even the saints, when they communicate with each other, maybe they use some kind of radio waves.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Guruji does break that down for us quite nicely in the next few paragraphs, for sure. The comment here is that no home is so narrow that London or Calcutta could not enter, and even the dullest intelligence was enlarged before the indisputable proof that no one aspect of man's omnipresence was found. So I wondered what you guys thought about this sentence: the dullest intelligence at large before indisputable proof of the aspect of man's omnipresence. It's quite a impactful statement, isn't it? Because really prior to the 19th century, 20th century, when we were coming into this new age of the Yuga, is my favorite subject, as you know, we didn't really have these higher concepts of being able, the subtle realms of electricity and so on. So this really would have been quite hard for people to accept, even in this day and age. I remember seeing a video of technology of the refrigerator and things like this coming out, and everybody was against it. And people really struggled to even bring that into their homes because they thought it was somewhat unnatural or something like this. So these technological revolutions we take for granted now, but really it does bring us slightly closer to a godlike realization, doesn't it?
Makes you wonder what else they're going to bring out. For people back then, it was so otherworldly, and you think, okay, well, what are they going to bring to the forefront now that's going to be otherworldly for us, right? But I was looking at this line: the dullest intelligence enlarged before indisputable proof of one aspect of man's omnipresence. And I was trying to understand what it means. I'm not sure if I actually know. I don't know. But one thing I wondered is, perhaps, is he referring to the dullest intelligence? Is that referring to the radio waves being an intelligence of sorts, but it's dull compared to God's intelligence. But it was perhaps proof of, the way that we can be omnipresent, as we exist in creation. Not sure. What do you think?
Maybe I took it really as the contrast between Sri Yukteswar and the common person, where Sri Yukteswar advanced thing. He's able to manipulate reality that we know it in a way that is not given to the dullard, let's say, in this sense, the sort of person of lesser intellect. They can send their voice and kind of pick up other people's voices through the radio signal. Frank.
Yeah, that's what I interpreted as well. But Lauren's interpretation about the radio is interesting. I think it might apply a bit later in this section. But yeah, in the same way that you interpreted, Chris, I thought that unlettered, unqualified, essentially, people and their understanding of these high concepts will just be really easy, and they'll be able to understand really high concepts like omnipresence through this technology. And like back then, this would have been the technology that transforms people's awareness into what technology, how it could change and transform your life. From writing letters and waiting weeks or months for a response to another letter, but receiving it, a second later, like someone's in the same room, is like magic, isn't it? But nowadays, I think about a similar thing, and I'm thinking the use of smartphones, for example. People that have got no clue as to how a smartphone would work, how you'd make one, all the technology that's involved, but they'd really, everyone's able to use it, everyone from the most remotest parts of the world to us in the West here.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it looks like magic to somebody from 200 years ago. The little telephones and everything, how we're able to video call each other, but yeah, we're getting more godlike. So the plot, then, we're looking at this radio signals mind. We're going to delve into this subject, where the analogy, as Guruji says here, is best understood through the radio itself. So he compared his guru as the perfect human radio. And yeah, I thought that was a very, again, comical slant. This chapter is a very funny one. So he's said really thoughts were no more than very subtle vibrations moving through the ether. And if you correctly tuned the radio, it can pick up desired musical numbers or out of thousands of other programs in every direction. So it was Sri Yukteswar that was able to ascertain and receive this thought that was persisting in the man's mind for a cauliflower. So here we have quite a simplistic and kind of, in a way, it feels intuitive that I get it. This analogy is very apt. It's very appropriate.
Were you guys thinking what kind of experience that man was having? If maybe Sri Yukteswar actually appeared to him in the vision and told him, I offer you one of my cauliflowers, or did he just put this idea into his mind very subtly, and then he went for it? I wonder if that happens to us in daily life. Sometimes we do something and then later we think about it. Why did I do this? This idea was just there for me. So I wonder if Guruji sometimes subtly directs us in the right way.
Not just us, like all manner of hurdles that need to be crossed. Like, for example, Babaji influencing the superintendent to call him to that random hill station in Ranikhet so he could orchestrate that meeting, and And I think in this year's convocation, one of the monks said, if you think about that story and imagine the gurus kind of guiding our lives to this point, how many times they would have influenced not just you, but all the different, circumstances around your life for you to come to this path that you're on, and how many other lifetimes as well. It's a pretty insane thought. But going back to this, thoughts are nothing more than subtle vibrations moving through the ether. Telepathy, the word telepathy is what we would probably use now for the kind of concepts that he's using here in terms of radio and transferring.
Sorry, I disconnected there very briefly. I'm back.
Sorry, I disconnected as well. Do you hear me? Mike, did you hear about the telepathy? Oh, you can hear him.
Yes.
I was saying telepathy was is like only in the 1980s it got used much more. So back then, this word wasn't there, hence radio is there. But this concept of thoughts being subtle vibrations moving through the ether is really profound, isn't it? Because you tend to think that thoughts are just your own electrical signals that are happening inside your consciousness or your mind, but here he's saying that they're actually moving thoughts or vibrations that are moving through the ether, and that's how essentially Sri Yukteswar would have influenced that crazy man, and Babaji would have influenced that officer in Ranikhet and all the other stories. But it's quite a profound concept, isn't it? Because it would mean that thoughts might have a mass.
Does it, Greg, also mean that thoughts may not be private?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Because it was somewhat contradictory when I read that to my mind, that previously I thought that maybe I'd read or heard somewhere that your thoughts are private. They can be. God doesn't really venture there. The Guru doesn't, unless you give the permission in a sense. But maybe
but this is how they would, though, isn't it? So they are available to Babaji to decode and just read, but he doesn't venture there, right? He doesn't. He only ventures if you give him the opinion. Not the opinion. Permission. That's the word. Yeah. Mike just commented saying telepathy was used in 1980. I just checked that engram as well, Mike. But it spiked like 50 years ago, as opposed to being as heavily used as it is now back 100 years ago, which is why I don't think telepathy is a word that's used in this section.
Yeah, but maybe just for the people who I suppose we're not even sharing this graph that Mike brought up, but
we can put it. Yeah, we can put it on the link. Yeah.
For a breakdown, Mike, what is it exactly we're all looking at here? Can you explain this?
So Google has a service. It's called the Ngram Viewer, and you can look for words being mentioned in literature throughout the centuries. It starts at 1800 usually. And you can see the word telepathy is first being used in the 1880s and then starts spiking until 1900 and gets another big increase after the year 2000. So quite interesting. Yeah, and it's an all-time high right now. So this is still a subject that's interesting. Yeah.
When the yugas kicked in, Mike, overlap on that and do all the other concepts here, didn't find a cool overlap, I'm sure. There's a really good footnote here that Guruji provides for us. So he says that this is what happened is best understood by the radio analogy, and so he gives a footnote 1 to talk about in 1939. The Associated Press reported that man himself as well as all kinds of supposedly inert matter consistently emits the rays that this instrument sees. So he's saying that those who don't believe in telepathy would or clairvoyants would have really enjoyed this report given by the Associated Press, because it shows that there is existence of invisible rays that travel from one person to another, and that it also shows that every atom and every molecule in nature is a continuous radio broadcasting station, and even after death, the substance that was a man or a woman continues to send out its delicate rays. And there's a very, very cool little fact here given to us that a single very large molecule may give off 1 million different wavelengths at the same time. And the difference here between radio rays and what we're more familiar with in other types of rays like light is that the prolonged period of time. So the radio waves can go for thousands of years versus light, which would have a single source, and then it would be ultimately absorbed by matter itself, and when it hits material and transmuted into other forms of energy. So this is quite a good insight, and at the time would have been groundbreaking. Right?
Indeed. Now we kind of understand this in scientific terms. We say that anything that isn't absolute zero, like 0 Kelvin, i.e. minus 273 degrees centigrade, anything that isn't absolute zero emits radiation, and no particle on Earth or in the universe is that that cold or that that temperature. So every single particle will, at quantum level, have something happening. So like it'll be like 0.1 Kelvin or 0.5 Kelvin, which means that it has to emit some radiation. So the whole of creation essentially is emitting something, which if you're tuned enough, you could receive.
Yeah. And thoughts are no more than very subtle vibrations moving through the ether. Got me thinking just how important thoughts are. And our importance really should be honed into positive thinking. There's a couple of readings from Guruji on positive thinking that I thought would be good to read.
Yeah. So, on positive thinking by Paramahansa Yogananda: change your thoughts if you wish to change your circumstances. Since you alone are responsible for your thoughts, only you can change them. You will want to change them when you realize that each thought creates according to its own nature. Remember that the law works at all times, and that you are always demonstrating according to the kind of thoughts you habitually entertain. Therefore, start now to think only those thoughts that will bring you health and happiness.
Thinking, reading, and repeating statements of truth with deep attention will help to clear away negation and to establish a positive attitude in your mind. Repeat your prayers and affirmations with deep concentration until you establish a habit of thought, until it becomes as natural for you to think in the right way as it previously was for you to think negatively.
And so just as Sri Yukteswar was able to be receptive to the pertinent thought that this man had for the cauliflower, we can see just how important these thoughts are when they go out there, in their everlasting nature. And it says here at the end of this paragraph, Sri Yukteswar picked up in this thought out of the countless thoughts of broadcasting human minds in the world. And I thought, actually, this goes back to the Samadhi poem, where it said, thoughts of all men, past, present, to come. And this reference that we had there. So it's a nice moment there where we're kind of understanding that line in the Samadhi poem a little bit better now, Greg.
Definitely. I love when he's giving more and more like information or like backing for us to help us understand it. But this thoughts being really, important and powerful also puts credence to, being in the right environment and in the right company, because, other people's thoughts can apparently influence your thoughts, especially if they're really strong-willed people. I can imagine they'd be even stronger. One other thing that I wanted to comment was that, you know, where in the last sentence where he says, out of the countless thoughts broadcasting in the human minds in the world, he essentially connected to that one half-witted man who was hankering for a cauliflower. In engineering, we have filters. So I imagine for him to tune into this specific frequency of this specific man, you have something called like a high pass filter and a low pass filter, and the frequencies in between. You set it so the frequencies in between you receive. So it's like this little bell wave, and in that range you receive it. So I can imagine, like, you know, when you like twist your radio station knob, well, that's what you're doing. You're adjusting that. So I can imagine Sri Yukteswar using that with his mind and just honing into this one person that's got this one transmission out there.
Yeah. Yukteswar, as Guruji described him, was the perfect radio station. He's also a pretty good teacher. So he's like omnipresent teacher of sorts, omniscient teacher. As Guruji says here, you know, they were walking toward the beach, and no sooner had Yukteswar become aware of this thought of the cauliflower, desire for the cauliflower from this man, and he was willing to gratify it. And for what reason, really, to act as a great lesson for us all. Instead of, you know, you could think, instead of him, Yukteswar, sitting down and saying, okay, here's how it works, and, you know, here's how I do things. And this is such a more, you know, engaging way to learn, isn't it? A practical way to learn. So I just thought it was a really beautiful, like, wise teaching moment. Greg.
Yeah, it's a good method for teaching, absolutely. But also, we can't just ignore or discount the theory that it could have been really a profound moment for this crazy man. It could have been a really nice and grace-giving moment, because, you know, when God and gurus, they're willing to gratify your most simplest of desires, but when you do receive it, then you've received it with a bit of grace, and it's been a bit of a blessing. So it was certainly, well, we don't know, but it may have been quite a moving moment for this crazy madcap, and it could have been one of those things that, like, it's you know, like you have like a set of dominoes, and you push one and one goes to the other. This could have been one of those key ones which set the wheel in motion for him to be transformed. So we don't know the backstory of this crazy man, but Sri Yukteswar no doubt does, and he would have, and yeah, it probably is all linked to his salvation as well in some way.
Isn't that every moment? And by the way, we're not advocating for thieving cauliflowers, folks.
Yeah, and what happened to "Thou shalt not steal," right? So, unless he was somehow, I feel like he was somehow, Priyanka probably right, he was probably somehow given by the grace of Sri Yukteswar this cauliflower, and there must be some blessing in there. And maybe, I mean, it's really funny, right? Like how he in the end he took only the cauliflower. So someone, like, I think Guruji said, someone with a vegetable fixation.
Yeah, he
but
didn't take his watch or his money or anything. No. So not a proper thief.
Yeah, but just to be part of a divine story that Guruji wrote down, like, this is, I'm guessing it's a huge blessing. You're right.
True.
Look back at incarnation's time and say, oh, look, that's me.
I'm in that book. Oh, yeah. I mean, I really feel anyway that, you know, things always happen for our own good, no matter what, right? But in this instance, it's actually quite a nice reminder that when things don't necessarily go our way in life, perhaps it's because a blessing is happening for somebody else, and we have to go through something that we don't particularly find enjoyable for that to occur for that person. You know, we always hear about the blessings being there. Well, sometimes they're perhaps more for other people than they are for us, even though we benefit too. That's what I love about this story, actually. so much happens for both Guruji and the cauliflower robber, So yeah, there's always lessons to be learned and always something to gain.
Yeah.
It's also really hard though, Lauren, in sometimes when if you if you're the tool, if you're the instrument that's being used to fulfill the needs or the desires of someone else, and then you just think of it as you have, i.e. God's using you as the the channel for the grace for them, and then you just have to be the willing accomplice. So that's it's tough. It's tough sometimes, isn't it? And I've been trying to convince some of my family members of this when they go through some hard times, and they just don't have it. It's really tough. It's quite hard.
I think it's important to also recognize that, isn't it, and talk about it, and just have a nod to it. Yeah, it's obviously not easy. It's the endurance that we have to face as we go through this lila.
Smile. This line was curious to me. The next line where Sri Yukteswar Guruji describes his divine eye had discovered the man dancing down the road before he had become visible to the disciples. So he's saying that the divine eye of Sri Yukteswar was able to see the man, and I wondered what the general interpretation of this was. Was it somewhat of a literal thing where he was able to see in his mind's eye? Up to this point, I'd considered it more of a thought transfer. So he picked up on the thought. He knew that this man was near, and he was able to direct it. But what's your take on this, Lauren?
My instant feeling for this was that it's Sri Yukteswar's third eye, right? His spiritual eye of perception. And whether that translated as something he could physically see or whether it was an intuitive knowing, I'm not sure. But the fact it said I and not eyes leads me to believe that he didn't physically see it with his gross eyes of matter, but he was able to perceive it in some way.
He also said, "You must be punished." I remember those words. And then he was looking for a way to punish him, and I guess Divine Mother sent just the right person to do the job. But like, God has quite a sense of humor, so I'm guessing that's how it went. And then Sri Yukteswar saw the perfect opportunity to have him take one of his precious cauliflowers.
There's an interesting discussion actually, because when you have when Guruji describes having visions, you'd imagine that you don't have a vision with your eyes open, your physical eyes open. Your eyes would be perhaps locked to the third eye, and then you'd have this vision, but it would be a vision that you can see. So perhaps you can also see through your third eye if the situation calls for it. So Sri Yukteswar could have seen, or he could have also, the third eye, as Lauren says, could be one about an all-feeling, an all-knowing element of that power of the third eye, which obviously Sri Yukteswar could connect to at any time as well.
I picture like one of those video games, the third-person view. Everyone is the character, but you're seeing it from 10 feet off. That's sort of what I'm sort of seeing in the divine eye, being able to see it just as you described there, Frank. But endlessly curious that. And there's a nice line here where we talked about it in the prior episode that Guruji made a mistake. He said his forgetfulness about not locking the ashram door gave this opportunity, or as Guruji describes it, a convenient excuse to deprive him of one of his valued veg. So just as you said, Mike, Divine Mother, God has a good sense of humor and put all of this together for us to pull apart and to learn from. And really, you know, even as an avatar, Guruji's there acting for us to, you know, in his forgetfulness, in this sense, even the simplest tasks in everyday life, we can all succumb to forgetting, overlooking. But what I thought, not to read into this too deeply, but, you know, perfection is there for us to strive toward. His guru is, you know, punishing him for this, right? He's saying, actually, this is significant enough for you to punish for. So there's some strive for perfection, but not to take it too seriously. You know, it's a very lighthearted lesson, right? So
it's a fun punishment.
Fun punishment, yeah.
There's no like lasting pain. There's no like physical cut to your arm or anything like that. Like that poor guy that got in, you know, that saint that got his arm cut off with a sword by that police officer. Nothing like that.
Or actually, no, that I think about this was Sri Yukteswar punishing Mukunda at the time for not telling him how it worked. You'll find out one day, you know.
Oh yeah, that's probably a worse punishment actually. Then because it's not even all the cauliflowers; it's one of 6. I mean, come on, that's just like
it's a pro rata. He can deal
like a tax. Yeah,
but having to wait for some 20 odd years, potentially having to wait until the signs caught up. And Guruji probably read that and thought one day, wow, you know, right, this is how it works. Although, albeit, I reckon he intuitively knew anyway.
But couldn't he have also known it after his samadhi experience?
Yeah.
Essentially, all knowledge was a vista that he was able to look into at any point. Or maybe he just let that book lay closed until it actually got revealed through science 30 years later.
Indeed. And so Guruji is Guru Sri Yukteswar acting as a broadcast station, as the perfect human radio, was a receiving instrument as well as a broadcasting one. But he received the thought of the man, and then Guruji says, through using his powerful will, he acted as a broadcaster, sending this thought and intention out. Frank.
Yes, so it's a receiver and a transmitter. Because I remember this is such a good example for how you should what capabilities you need to develop, because this is like a tangible real world example what Sri Yukteswar did. Obviously not one that we can use, but one that we can use is after our meditations, you know, when we sit in the stillness, there's that thought you can have, which is, you know, you can say, reveal thyself, reveal thyself, reveal thyself. You can just keep saying that to yourself until one day he does reveal himself. But if you're saying reveal thyself, you're being a receiving station, right? You want to receive the revelation, so you reveal thyself. And then there's that other, like the parallel to that one, which is receive my love. You can also use that one, receive my love, receive my love, receive my love, afterwards, after you're meditating. And that one is where you're transmitting from your heart to outwards, and you're asking God to receive the love. So here, those are easier ways we can practice what Sri Yukteswar has done, obviously on a much more profound level.
Indeed, you had an analogy earlier on, Priyanka, about the knob on a radio.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the will would be? The power of the will.
Doing the turning motion.
The turning motion.
Yeah.
I thought it might be the battery.
The battery.
We'll talk about the willpower with the human radio in the next episode as well. So we can think about this. It will be revealed. Yeah.
It will be revealed.
Yeah, I could have thought maybe it's the electricity in the sort of battery. and the more powerful.
That's the prana.
And we on the topic of receptivity, Priyank and Lauren's going to take us through it.
God is not partial. His spirit is as fully within you as it was in Jesus and the great masters. Find it by making your mind more transparent, more receptive. The more you meditate and remember that image of God, the more you will feel God's harmony uniting all things. Meditation and holding on to God's presence in that inner calmness all day long is what is necessary.
Here's a question for you as well. Do we think the man was very receptive? Or do we think that the power of the will of Sri Yukteswar was the main driving force? Or do you think that there's a balance between them?
I saw lots of shaking heads. I was like, no, it's not receptive. But I wonder, he has to be slightly receptive in order for it to work, because we all have free will, right? And we can choose whether to be receptive to blessings or not, or to the guidance or will of God and gurus. So he must have had some aspect of receptivity in order for Sri Yukteswar to influence his mind to the point where he acted upon it. Is my feeling. Well, how much he is receptive, I don't know.
Mike, what's your take?
He's receptive like a horse is receptive to a carrot, right? And he was just telling him, you're gonna find the carrot over there in that house. I don't know if he really made an effort to be receptive.
Yeah.
I think because this, he's described as a crazy man is important, because it didn't need to, the story didn't, for it to work, he didn't need to be a crazy man. He could have just been a man, another sadhu or something like that. But he was a crazy man, which I think we discussed this last time, which led me to infer that he had lots of such insane thoughts in his daily life. So in this particular instance, he was just thinking, oh, this is another one. Let me just carry on doing what I do every moment of my life, which is act on my every whim. So he didn't, because there was no description of like him in tears, and touching, touching his forehead to the ground, or any sort of reverence or nothing like that you'd expect if he was aware that Sri Yukteswar or someone of eminence had given him this grace.
Yeah, he strutted away. Actually, sort of proud that he's had this in his possession. So there was pride. There's not too much room for receptivity of God. But I was sort of angling towards, maybe it's a double-edged sword. Maybe he is just receptive, but to everything, and caught up in Maya, because he's taken on all these bad habits of, not having discipline in the mind and so on and so forth. So
grotesque dancing, don't forget that.
That's the greatest sin. Yeah.
I'm quite a big fan of grotesque dancing in private.
So yeah, I thought maybe he was a bit receptive. He had to be some degree, but maybe it was an ill-disciplined form of receptivity. And so, yeah, we have Guruji saying that the role that the man successfully played led him to ascertain this single cauliflower. And I thought maybe if we turn our minds to God as a discipline to be receptive there, then we shall reap the benefits. And really, as we talked about this willpower, this is the key ingredient, as Guruji says, that he operated Sri Yukteswar himself through this powerful will of his. There's a few readings on Paramahansa Yogananda telling us how to develop an unconquerable will. And this is inspiration and counsel from Paramahansa Yogananda. Mike, can you kick us off with the first reading?
Yeah, I just read it to myself. It's extremely powerful, so beware. Inspiration and counsel from Paramahansa Yogananda on developing an unconquerable will. Will is the switch that controls everything in this universe. If you don't exercise your willpower, you will be a weakling, easily influenced by your environment. When you develop will, no matter how you are pounded down by life, you will rise again and say, I am successful, I can win.
Choose a good, wholesome, constructive goal and then determine that you are going to achieve it. No matter how many times you fail, keep on trying. No matter what happens, if you have unalterably resolved, the earth may be shattered, but I will keep on doing the best I can. You are using dynamic will, and you will succeed. That dynamic will is what makes one man rich and another man strong, and another man a saint.
The greatest will should be used to meditate. The Lord wants us to discover our divine will and to use it to find Him. Develop this God-seeking dynamic will. It is not profound words that will give you emancipation, but your own efforts through meditation.
So there we go. And that's the end of the part that we'll cover today, folks. And we have the next episode. Mike, you've already given us a bit of a cliffhanger teaser, but what's look forward to in the next?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
One comment that on this last line that we went through was that he'd led, essentially Sri Yukteswar had successfully directed this peasant to go and do this and get this single cauliflower. And one word we would use in today's English is probably auto-suggestion for things such as this. And I just did the n-gram search for auto-suggestion, and there was a massive spike in 1920.
Oh, interesting.
Like a colossal spike. Like it was down at it goes like 5 times higher than the previous.
Mm.
And now it's since 2000, like telepathy is coming up back again.
Yeah. Yogananda is the mother of all motivational coaches, I find. In the next episode, we'll continue talking along those same lines. We'll talk about intuition and so this kind of receiving telepathy can also be receiving soul guidance and figuring out what that is. He's talking about truth and the what thoughts are, and that thoughts are actually eternal and we don't create them. We only perceive them, and we don't create truth in our minds. We just perceive truth. And that man himself mind is trying to enslave him, but he's all pervading spirit. And those telepathic features that men have are a glimpse of that. Then he has a quote in there by Charles Robert Richet, the French philosopher, and he talks about a quote of his about things that are understood are not noteworthy anymore to people, and Guruji argues that it's more about familiarity and that we actually don't understand much of our physics or the underlying laws that we live by. And then he talks about the difficulty of accepting knowledge into what he calls a framework of accepted knowledge. So whenever there's something new coming, it is in the beginning, we try to not believe it and fight it, and then slowly it becomes accepted.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us. With that, we'll see you next time. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.